The video opens with a woman, Maya, in her late 20s, sitting in a cozy, well-lit room. Behind her are shelves filled with beautiful old books. She has a warm but determined look on her face. She takes a deep breath before speaking directly to the camera. The day I finally reopened my grandfather's vintage bookstore, the single dream I had poured my entire inheritance into, my parents handed the keys to my brother. "He just has a better vision for it, darling," my mother said with a placid smile. So I let them keep the building, but I took its soul. They didn't realize until a week later, when the call started, that a bookstore without any books is just a room full of empty shelves. It's funny how a single moment can throw your entire life into sharp, painful focus. For 2 years, that bookstore was my world. Not just a project, but a resurrection. It was called The Gilded Page, a name my grandfather had chosen half a century ago. It used to be the heart of our small town's main street, a magical, dusty place that smelled of aging paper, leather, and pipe tobacco. Grandpa was a curator of stories, not just a seller of books. He knew every customer by name, knew their tastes, and could recommend a book that would change their life. When he passed away, the store fell into disrepair. My dad inherited it, but he had no interest in the business. To him, it was just a piece of property, a tax burden. For a decade it sat there, a ghost of its former self, windows clouded with grime, a closed sign yellowing in the sun. But I never forgot. I spent my childhood in that store, hiding in the history aisle, convinced I could hear whispers from the past. My grandmother, his wife, was the one who nurtured that love in me. She was the quiet force behind my grandfather, the one who managed the finances and kept the dream alive. Before she passed 2 years ago, she left me a modest but significant inheritance. It wasn't life-changing money for most people, but for me, it was everything. It was the key. In her will, she wrote, "For Maya to chase a dusty dream." She knew. She always knew. So I went to my parents with a proposal. Let me use my inheritance to bring the Gilded Page back to life. I wouldn't ask them for a dime. I would handle the renovations, the inventory, the business licenses, everything. In return, I would run it, own the business, and pay them a fair rent for the space once it was profitable. It was a perfect plan. They would get income from a dormant property, and I would get to live my dream and honor my grandfather's legacy. My father, practical and always looking for the easy way out, agreed immediately. "Sure, kiddo. Knock yourself out. Just don't ask me to haul any boxes." My mother was more effusive. "Oh, Maya, that's a wonderful idea. A family legacy. Reborn. It'll be so good for you to have a project." The way she said project felt a little condescending, like it was a hobby to keep me busy, but I ignored it. I was too high on the possibility of it all. My brother, Liam, who was there, just smirked. Liam is the golden child, the charismatic one with a $1 million smile and a resume of half-finished, great ideas. He'd dropped out of 2 different colleges, tried to launch 3 different startups that never got past the business card stage, and was currently a freelance creative consultant, which meant he slept until noon and occasionally designed a logo for a friend's podcast. "A bookstore? Seriously, Maya," he'd said, leaning back in his chair. "A bit analog, don't you think? You should make it an NFT gallery or something." He laughed, and my parents chuckled along with him. "Oh, Liam, you and your big ideas." my mom cooed. I just smiled tightly. "A bookstore," I said, my voice firm. "It's what Grandpa would have wanted." The agreement was made. It felt like a handshake deal among family. I was naive. I thought that was enough. So I cashed out my inheritance, every single penny my grandmother had left me, and I got to work. The next 18 months were a blur of sawdust, sweat, and spreadsheets. The building was in worse shape than I'd imagined. I was there from dawn until long after dusk. I learned about plumbing, about electrical wiring, about zoning permits. I hired local contractors, people my grandfather had known, and I worked alongside them. I tore out rotting floorboards with my own hands, replastered walls, and spent weeks painstakingly restoring the original mahogany shelves. Every decision was mine. I chose the deep emerald green for the walls, the warm Edison bulb lighting that made the room glow, the antique reading chairs I found at flea markets. I was building a sanctuary, but the physical renovation was only half of it. A bookstore is nothing without its collection. I didn't want to be a generic shop selling the latest bestsellers you could get on Amazon. I wanted to be the Gilded Page. So I spent my weekends driving all over the state, sometimes even crossing state lines, to attend estate sales, library clear-outs, and private collection auctions. I used my grandmother's money, my money, to acquire rare first editions, signed copies, and beautiful out-of-print classics. Each book was a treasure I hunted down. I built a collection that was unique, valuable, and deeply personal. I cataloged every single one, creating a digital database, noting its provenance, condition, and acquisition cost. This wasn't just inventory. It was a curated library. All the while my family would pop in occasionally. My dad would nod and say, "Looks good, kiddo. Don't break the bank." My mom would bring me lukewarm coffee in a paper cup and offer unsolicited advice. "Are you sure about that green, dear? It's a bit dark. Maybe something more cheerful?" And Liam would breeze in, looking impossibly cool and effortless, and survey my work like a king, inspecting his domain. "You know what this place needs?" he'd say, snapping his fingers. "A coffee bar, a high-end espresso machine, and we could host, like, influencer poetry slams." He'd use the word "we" a lot. "We should have a curated vinyl section." I'd just nod, covered in paint spatter and exhaustion, and say, "That's a thought, Liam." I never saw him lift a single box. I never saw him hold a paintbrush. But in his mind, and my parents' minds, his 5-minute brainstorming sessions were somehow a vital contribution. The resentment was a low hum beneath the surface, a constant companion to the scent of wood stain and old paper. I told myself it didn't matter. The work would speak for itself. When the store was open and successful, they would see. They would finally see me. The day of the grand reopening arrived. It was a perfect autumn evening. The store was breathtaking. The lights glowed, the restored shelves gleamed, and the books, my beautiful books, waited like jewels in their settings. I had built a community online over the past year, teasing the restoration, and the place was packed. The mayor was there, a reporter from the local paper, old customers of my grandfather's who came with tears in their eyes, and new younger faces drawn in by the buzz. I stood by the counter, my heart thrumming with a feeling I'd never experienced before. Pure, unadulterated pride. I had done this. Against all odds, I had built this. My dad, beaming, tapped a glass for a toast. He stood in the center of the room, soaking in the admiration. "Thank you all for coming," he began, seeing my father's store, the Gilded Page, brought back to life. "It's a dream come true." He put an arm around me. "And I have to give a huge thank you to my daughter, Maya." The crowd applauded, and I felt a blush of warmth spread across my chest. She did an incredible job managing the renovations and getting the place ready. Her hard work and dedication have been truly something. He paused and his smile widened. She laid a beautiful foundation. And now, I'm thrilled to announce the next chapter for the Gilded Page. My brow furrowed. The next chapter? I was the chapter. While Maya is fantastic with the details, he continued, his voice booming with false magnanimity, this business needs a visionary, someone with the ambition and creative energy to take it into the future. That's why I'm so proud to officially hand over the management and future of this store to my son Liam. He gestured to Liam, who stepped forward with a confident grin, waving to the crowd as if he'd just won an Oscar. The air was sucked out of my lungs. The room started to spin. I could hear scattered, confused applause. I looked at Liam, then at my dad. This had to be a joke. A horribly cruel, elaborate joke. I turned to my mother, my eyes pleading for an explanation, for some sign that this was a mistake. She just squeezed my arm and whispered, her voice syrupy sweet. "Isn't it wonderful, honey? He has so many brilliant ideas for the space. He's going to make it a real cultural hub." I stared at her, dumbfounded. "What are you talking about?" I whispered back, my voice trembling. This is my store. We had an agreement." My mother's smile tightened just a fraction. "Don't be difficult, Maya," she murmured, her voice losing its warmth. "It's still in the family. Liam has that star quality. You're more of a behind-the-scenes person. You know that. You made it beautiful, and now he'll make it famous. A behind-the-scenes person." The words hit me like a physical blow. All my work, my money, my soul, reduced to stage setting for my brother's next fleeting fantasy. I looked over at Liam, who was now charmingly explaining his vision for a subscription box service for curated vibes, to the newspaper reporter. He caught my eye and gave me a little wink, as if we were in on this together, as if I should be grateful. The heat of humiliation and rage rose in my throat, so hot it felt like acid. I wanted to scream. I wanted to climb onto the counter and tell everyone the truth. Tell them about my inheritance, the 18-hour days, the fact that Liam thought a first edition was a type of coffee. But I looked at their faces, my father's proud, oblivious expression, my mother's serene, dismissive smile, my brother's smug entitlement, and I knew it would be pointless. They had already written the story. In their version, I was the dutiful mule, and he was the thoroughbred destined for the winner's circle. Arguing would only make me look hysterical, ungrateful, difficult. So I did the one thing they didn't expect. I composed myself. I smoothed down my dress, took a deep, shaky breath, and manufactured a smile. I walked over to my brother, who was basking in the glow of undeserved praise. "Congratulations, Liam," I said, my voice eerily calm. He clapped me on the shoulder. "Thanks, sis. We're gonna kill it. I've already got some great ideas for a new logo. We. That word again. I just nodded. I'm sure you do. I turned and walked through the crowd, past the curious and sympathetic glances, and out the front door, into the cool night air. I didn't look back. I didn't cause a scene. I just vanished. They probably thought I'd gone home to sulk, that I'd cry it out, and then come back tomorrow, ready to be a good behind-the-scenes girl. They had no idea what I was really going to do. The silence I offered them that night was just the beginning. The real silence was coming for those beautiful, empty shelves. The next morning, I didn't call them. I didn't text. I didn't demand an explanation. I drank a cup of black coffee, my hands perfectly steady, and I began to execute my own plan. A plan born of 2 years of meticulous record-keeping and a lifetime of being underestimated. I pulled out the file, the one with every receipt, every invoice, every bank statement. The proof that the heart and soul of the Gilded Page, the books themselves, were purchased with my grandmother's inheritance. My money, not the family's, not my father's, mine. Legally, unequivocally, mine. The building was theirs, but its contents, the entire curated collection, worth tens of thousands of dollars, belonged to me. I called the only 2 people I knew, I could trust. 2 friends from college who knew the whole story and were simmering with second-hand rage on my behalf. I need a moving truck and 4 dozen empty boxes, I said. No questions asked. An hour later, they were at my apartment. I gave them keys to the bookstore. Be quick, be quiet, I instructed. Pack every single book. Leave the shelves. Just take the books. They went. While they worked, I sat at my laptop and executed the second part of my plan. The customer database. The email list with over 2,000 engaged followers I had personally cultivated. The social media accounts with their thousands of fans. I changed every password. I transferred ownership of the domains to my personal account. I downloaded the customer list and wiped it from the store's computer. By noon it was done. My friends returned with the truck, laden with my treasures. We unloaded them into a storage unit I'd rented that morning. When they were finished, one of them, Sarah, put her hand on my shoulder. "Are you okay?" she asked, her eyes full of concern. I looked at the stacks of boxes, each one filled with stories I had personally chosen. And for the first time since the night before, I felt a sense of profound peace. "I will be," I said. I left them one thing, a single hardcover copy of Charles Dickens' Great Expectations placed in the very center of the large checkout counter. I didn't even know if they'd get the irony. For the rest of the day, I waited. My phone was silent. They were probably celebrating, drinking champagne, and toasting to Liam's brilliant future. They likely assumed I was licking my wounds and would eventually come around. That was my role, after all, to absorb the injustice, to swallow the hurt, and to ultimately accept my place. But every hour that passed without a call only solidified my resolve. This wasn't just about a bookstore. It was about a pattern that had been set in stone since we were children. A pattern of my effort being the foundation for his glory. And I was finally done being the foundation. It's strange how a deep betrayal clarifies things. It burns away all the fog of hope and obligation, and leaves you with a cold, hard truth. This wasn't the first time my family had sacrificed my hard work for Liam's benefit. It wasn't even the most blatant. It was just the culmination of 1,000 smaller cuts. The memory that surfaced, as I sat there in the quiet of my apartment, was from the 8th grade science fair. I had worked for 2 solid months on my project. A detailed, 2-scale, motorized model of the solar system. I had researched planetary orbits, soldered wires, and painstakingly painted each tiny planet. It was my masterpiece. The night before the fair, it was sitting on our dining room table, perfect and ready. Liam, who was in 10th grade and too cool for everything, had forgotten he also had a project due. He'd done nothing. I remember my mom's frantic whispered conversation with my dad in the kitchen. "He's going to fail, Tom. We have to do something." I went to bed, naively assuming something meant he'd be staying up all night writing a report on photosynthesis. I woke up the next morning and went downstairs to get my project. It was different. Someone had taken a can of silver spray paint and covered the whole thing in a thick, glittering coat. My carefully painted details, Jupiter's red spot, Saturn's rings, were obscured under a tacky, uniform shimmer. On the base, in my brother's messy handwriting, was a new title, The Cosmos, an Artistic Interpretation. I was horrified. I ran to my parents, holding back tears. "What happened to my project?" My mother wouldn't meet my eyes. "Liam just added a little creative flair, honey. It looks much more eye-catching now, don't you think?" Liam came downstairs, yawning. "Yeah, it was boring before," he said. "Now it has some pizzazz." At the science fair, my methodical scientific project was presented as a joint effort. Liam, with his easy charm, did all the talking. He spun a ridiculous tale about how it represented the metaphysical loneliness of space, and the judges, completely snowed, gave us the first-place ribbon. He took it home. It sat on his dresser for years. When I tried to explain to my parents that he had done nothing but ruin my work, and then take credit for it, my dad sat me down. "Maya, you have to learn to be a team player. Family helps family. Liam was in a jam, and you two pulled it off together. You should be proud of him for thinking on his feet." I wasn't proud. I was gutted. It wasn't about the ribbon. It was about the casual erasure of my effort. It was the lesson, taught to me so clearly, that my meticulous work was merely raw material for my brother's last-minute, flashy performances. And my parents weren't just bystanders. They were the directors of the show. That incident set the template for everything. The summer job I worked, only to have my savings borrowed to pay for Liam's spring break trip. The car I was promised, which was then given to him because his was less reliable. Each time, the justification was the same. Liam needs it more. Don't be selfish, Maya. We're a family. They had trained me to expect it, to absorb the loss, and move on. They thought they had trained me so well that I would do it again with the bookstore. They miscalculated. They didn't realize that this time, I had the receipts. The first call came on Monday afternoon. It was Liam. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a text popped up. "Call me. Urgent." I ignored it. Then a call from my mom. I ignored that too. Then my dad. Ignored. The text started flooding in. Maya, what is going on? This isn't funny. Where are the books? Finally, a voicemail from Liam appeared. I pressed play, a strange sense of detachment washing over me. His voice wasn't charming or cool. It was high-pitched, cracking with panic. Maya, where the hell are all the books? I came in this morning and the place is empty. The shelves are bare. Did we get robbed? Call me back right now. The reporter from the Gazette is coming back this afternoon to take photos. I almost laughed. Did we get robbed? The sheer audacity of him using the word we. I deleted the voicemail. A few hours later, my dad called again. This time, I answered. His voice was strained, attempting a tone of authority that was paper-thin. Maya, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but it needs to stop. Your brother is in a panic. The store is empty. I kept my own voice level, almost placid. Yes, I know. I have the books. There was a long, stunned silence on the other end of the line. I could practically hear him processing that. You have them. What does that mean? Why? It means they're my property, Dad, I said simply. I bought them with Grandma's inheritance. I have the bank statements and invoices to prove it. You gave Liam the building, and you can keep it. But the business, the actual inventory, is mine, and I've removed it. The silence stretched on, thick with disbelief. That's ridiculous, he finally sputtered, his voice rising. Those books belong to the store. They belong to the person who paid for them, I countered, my voice still calm. And that person was me. You wanted a visionary to run the place, and you got one. I'm sure a man with his talent can figure out how to fill a few shelves. This is betrayal, Maya, he roared, finally dropping the facade. After everything we've done for you, we gave you the opportunity of a lifetime. That's when my own calm finally cracked. Just a little. No, Dad. I gave you an opportunity. I took a derelict building you couldn't be bothered with, and I turned it into a valuable asset with my own money and my own labor. I poured my soul into that place, and in return, you publicly humiliated me and gave my dream away to my brother like it was a party favor. We're not talking about betrayal here. We're talking about consequences. There was another pause. Then my mother's voice came on the line, sharp and laced with venom. You ungrateful child! You've embarrassed this entire family. No, I said, and my voice was like ice. You embarrassed yourselves. You just needed me to be there to clean up the mess. But I'm not anymore. I hung up the phone. I blocked their numbers. I sat back, my heart pounding, but my mind was crystal clear. The war had just begun, but I had already won the most important battle. I had taken back my story. The aftermath was a slow-motion explosion. My parents, realizing I wouldn't budge, shifted tactics from anger to manipulation. They launched a full-scale smear campaign among our extended family. The narrative they spun was a masterpiece of victimhood. I was the volatile, emotional daughter who, in a fit of jealousy over her brother's brilliant new role, had a meltdown and spitefully sabotaged the family business. They claimed they had funded the entire project, and that I had thrown their generosity back in their faces. They conveniently omitted any mention of my inheritance, or the 18 months of back-breaking labor. The calls and texts started coming from aunts, uncles, and cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. At first, they were concerned. Maya, honey, your mom is so worried about you. What happened? I heard you had a big fight. You know how your brother is. You should just talk to them. I didn't respond to any of them. I knew engaging would be like wrestling in mud. I'd just get dirty. My silence, however, was interpreted as guilt. The narrative was working, and for a week, I felt a profound sense of isolation. I started to question myself. Was I the villain? Was I being cruel? But then, the tide began to turn. Not because of anything I did, but because of what Liam and my parents couldn't do. Liam, the visionary, was faced with a stark reality. He had a beautiful, empty room and zero inventory. He tried to stock the shelves quickly, buying cheap mass-market paperbacks and whatever was on the bestseller list at Costco. The Gilded Page, once a curated haven for book lovers, started to look like a chaotic airport bookstore. The old customers my grandfather had served, the ones who had been so excited about the reopening, came in once, looked around in confusion, and left. The new community I had built online started asking questions on the store's social media pages, which were now being run by Liam. What happened to all the vintage collections? I thought this was a rare bookstore. Liam's responses were vague and dismissive, and people noticed. The local newspaper reporter, who had been poised to write a glowing feature, published a short, lukewarm piece that described the store as having an identity crisis. The biggest blow came when Liam tried to host his first event, an open mic night for creatives. According to a cousin who went out of morbid curiosity, only 7 people showed up, 3 of whom were my parents. The cultural hub was a ghost town. They had the stage, but the star had no act. The pretty shell was useless without the soul I had so carefully cultivated. They had stolen the theater, but had no play to perform. Then came the call that changed everything. It wasn't from a family member. It was from Mr. Henderson, my grandfather's old accountant, a sharp, no-nonsense man in his 70s who had known me since I was a child. Maya, he said, his voice grave. I've just had a very interesting meeting with your father and brother. I held my breath. They wanted to apply for a small business loan to purchase inventory. They listed the existing collection as collateral. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. They what? They seem to be under the impression that the books are a business asset, he continued. I told them that without proof of purchase or ownership, no bank would even look at the application. Your father got very flustered. He said you had all the records. Maya, what on earth is going on over there? And so? I told him. I told him everything. About my grandmother's will, my inheritance, the invoices, the agreement, the grand reopening. He listened patiently, punctuated only by a few grim "I sees." When I finished, there was a long silence. He's a fool, Maya, Mr. Henderson said finally, his voice shaking with what sounded like suppressed anger. Your grandfather would be horrified. But your grandmother, he chuckled softly, your grandmother would be proud. She always said you had a steel spine. He paused. I assume you have all the necessary documentation for the collection. I have a 3-inch binder full of it, I replied. Good, he said. Hold on to that. It seems your family is about to learn a very expensive lesson in contract law. That single conversation was the crack in their dam of lies. Mr. Henderson was universally respected. If he was questioning my father's story, others would too. The narrative was beginning to crumble, not from my attacks, but from its own weightless, hollow foundation. They had built their story on sand, and the tide was coming in. The lesson in contract law came sooner than they expected. My father, in a desperate attempt to regain control, had his lawyer send me a cease and desist letter. It was a joke. It accused me of theft of company property and demanded the immediate return of the store's inventory. It was all bluster and threats, designed to intimidate me into submission. They were still operating under the assumption that I was the same girl who would back down to avoid a fight. I didn't hire a lawyer. I didn't need one. I simply photocopied the first page of my grandmother's will, the bank statement showing the inheritance deposit, and a dozen of the largest invoices for the book acquisitions, all clearly paid from my personal account. I mailed them back to their lawyer with a sticky note on top that said, "I believe you'll find the provenance of the collection is quite clear. Best, Maya." I never heard from their lawyer again. The failure of their legal threat seemed to be the final straw for Liam. The pressure was getting to him. The empty store was a monument to his failure, and he wasn't used to failing so publicly. The breaking point came about a month after the reopening. I started a small, online-only version of the Gilded Page. I used the social media accounts I'd retained and the email list I'd built. I started selling the books from my collection directly to the community that was waiting for them. My first virtual book drop of rare science fiction sold out in 3 hours. Word got around fast. People were talking about the real Gilded Page being online. Liam must have seen it. One evening, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered cautiously. It was him, and he was drunk. "You think you're so clever, don't you?" he slurred, his voice thick with self-pity and rage. "Running your little online thing. Trying to ruin me." I stayed silent. His voice was pathetic, not intimidating. "It's all your fault," he whined. "This place is a disaster. No one comes in. Dad's yelling at me about the loan. Mom keeps crying. You did this. You sabotaged me." "I didn't do anything, Liam," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "I just took what was mine. You're the one who wanted the store. You have it. This is what you wanted, isn't it? The spotlight? Well, you're in it. How does it feel?" "I hate you," he spat. "You've always been jealous of me." I actually laughed. A short, bitter sound. "Jealous? Liam, I've spent my entire life cleaning up your messes, taking the blame for your mistakes, and watching you get rewarded for my work. I'm not jealous. I'm free." I hung up. That was the last time I ever spoke to him. The visionary had run out of visions. The charming golden boy had revealed himself to be nothing more than a hollow, gilded shell, just like the store he was now trapped in. The final chapter of the Gilded Page ended not with a bang, but with a quiet, ignominious whimper. A few months after Liam's drunken call, a "for lease" sign appeared in the window. They couldn't sustain it. The rent, the utilities, the sheer cost of maintaining an empty, failing business was too much. They had failed to secure a loan, failed to generate income, and failed to bully me into returning. They had been handed a beautifully restored, turnkey opportunity, and they had run it into the ground in under 6 months. The ultimate irony was that my father ended up having to sell the building to cover the debts they'd incurred. He got a decent price for it. The property value had increased significantly. After all, thanks to my renovations. My online bookstore, on the other hand, was thriving. Without the overhead of a physical location, my profit margins were high. I had a loyal, growing customer base who appreciated the curation and the story behind the business. I was doing what I loved, on my own terms. I was building something that was truly mine, from the foundation to the rooftop. The lesson in all of this wasn't about revenge. If I had wanted revenge, I would have fought them, aired the dirty laundry publicly, made a scene. But I realized that fighting them would have meant staying in their orbit, playing their game by their rules. The real victory wasn't in watching them fail. It was in my own success, completely independent of them. The most important lesson I learned is that your value is not determined by those who are committed to misunderstanding you. For years, I had been seeking validation from people who were incapable of giving it. I thought if I just worked harder, was more helpful, more agreeable, that one day they would finally see me. But they were never going to see me, because they needed me to stay small so my brother could seem big. My worth wasn't something they could bestow upon me. It was something I had to claim for myself. Walking away from that bookstore, from that family dynamic, was the hardest and best decision of my life. I didn't just take the books. I took back my power, my narrative, and my future. I left them with an empty building, but I walked away with a full life. So what now? I've moved to a new city. The Gilded Page is now a registered LLC, fully and legally mine. I'm even scouting locations for a small physical shop, a place built on my terms from day one. I don't speak to my parents or my brother. The silence is no longer a weapon or a strategy. It's just a fact. It's the quiet space where I've been able to hear my own voice for the first time. I know there are people out there watching this who might be in a similar situation. You might be the responsible one, the behind-the-scenes person, the one who quietly holds everything together while someone else takes the credit. You might be pouring your heart and soul into a family, a job, or a relationship, hoping that one day your efforts will finally be recognized. My message to you is this: don't wait for them to see your value. See it for yourself. Recognize that your skills, your passion, your hard work, that's your inventory. That's your collection. And you are the sole proprietor. You don't have to burn the whole building down, but you have every right to take what is yours and build your own damn store. It's scary, but the freedom on the other side is worth more than any empty praise or hollow promise they could ever offer you. Thank you for listening to my story. It's the first time I've told it all in one go, and it feels good. It feels like closing a book that I'm finally finished reading. If you've ever felt like the behind-the-scenes person, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Let's remind each other that we're not alone. And if you'd like to follow my journey as I build the new Gilded Page, please like and subscribe. There are so many more chapters left to write.